Yo, what's going on guys? Alex here. Welcome back to another Monster Hunter video, and today I want to talk about flagship monsters, the most iconic monsters in the series. The monsters that of course are the poster boys for their respective generations, for their respective titles, and throughout the years we've been exposed to some fantastic offerings, some of them far more unique than others. So today I want to recap all of the main series flagship monsters, go through where they appeared, when they appeared, and of course highlight some of the cool things about them. So if you guys do enjoy this, a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below, let me know which of the flagship monsters are your favorites, let me know when you entered the series, and also with the potential rumors of course the next Monster Hunter potentially being revealed later on this year, what would you like to see in a brand new flagship monster? I for one always like when the monsters are very different. If we move away from the sort of traditional wyvern setup, I would definitely love to still see something so drastically different, but let me know if you guys have any thoughts down below. Also, before we get started, if you guys have yet to pick up the awesome ponchis, don't forget we do still have some of these available. They are going fast, but if you didn't get to pick up any of yours last year, then definitely head over to the endgame store. These are of course the super cute, officially licensed Monster Hunter ponchis, little cute palicos with monster ponchos, fully removable, and if you want to grab them, you can find a link to the endgame store in the description box down below. Also, thank you to everyone that has bought them and has of course sort of shared those on social media. It's been fantastic seeing you guys receive your products. Anyway, to begin with, let's start at the beginning. First generation. To no one's surprise, this of course goes to Rathalos. Rathalos was the flagship for Monster Hunter, and of course also for Monster Hunter Portable and Freedom, of course the portable PSP versions of the game. Rathalos is, let's be honest, the poster boy for the entire series. If anyone says Monster Hunter to you, chances are the first monster that comes to your mind is going to be Rathalos. Regardless of whether it's your favorite, it is impossible to deny that Rathalos is synonymous with this series. He's also appeared in every single Monster Hunter game, so you really can't escape him, the icon of the series. They're described as large bipedal wyverns with spiny armored hide covering their body, and of course their outer shell features the signature brighter, more vibrant colors than their female counterpart, the Rathian. Of course the signature glowing red for Rathalos is also equally iconic. However, you then turn your attention to the second game, the Monster Hunter G expansion, that then switched over to Azure Rathalos. So in terms of skeleton, in terms of sort of species, we are still keeping things pretty close to home, but Azure Rathalos was the subspecies of Rathalos, and of course it did also have a fantastic armor set that came with it. Characteristic-wise, it is similar on almost all fronts to the regular Rathalos, however its shell that is normally fiery red is now an azure color, and from personal experience, it tends to spend a little bit more time in the sky. He's fast, he's cunning, and will rain down fire from above. Then when you move on to the second generation, first things first, we had Monster Hunter 2, Monster Hunter 2. This was actually Kushala Daora, the dragon with metallic skin. This of course is an elder dragon, and it definitely is a fantastic beast. It has gone through various iterations throughout the years, some of the iterations more annoying than others. I would definitely say probably my favorite time fighting Kushala was in 4 Ultimate. Meanwhile in some other titles it spent a little bit too long in the sky for my liking. That being said, of course the metallic elder dragon with mastery over the wind definitely did present a challenge to many hunters. However, moving on from there to the point at which I entered the series, Monster Hunter Freedom 2 or Monster Hunter Portable 2nd. This, of course, is where I began my Monster Hunter journey. I walked into my local game store, I saw, at the time, my uneducated self, what I called a dinosaur on the front of the cover. And the game was on buy one get one free. I bought a copy for my friend so that I could go home and hunt quote unquote dinosaurs. Honestly, Tigrex is still to this day one of my favorite monsters, a fearsome creature, a monster that gave me so much trouble at the beginning of the game, to the point where I even put the game down, didn't like it, was never going to return to it until later on I decided I wanted to give it another try, and then it became one of my favorite game series of all time. The rest, as they say, is history. Tigrex being a quadrupedal wyvern with its wings evolved into 4 legs, allowing it to run at incredibly fast speeds, it was definitely a menacing monster to face, especially when you are sort of in the frosty regions and it is just charging at you in rage mode. I will say I used that crawl space more times than I care to count, and definitely dived out the area just to save my own backside. But Tigrex definitely earned the right of flagship monster. Then turn our attention to Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, we then had Nagakuga. Honestly, a fantastic creature. This thing having a sort of similar skeletal structure to that of Tigrex, but this time around embodying the way of the ninja. Stealthy, fast, lethal, with some truly fantastic weaponry and some fantastic armor. This thing was a blast to fight. I still remember to this day my first fights against this monster. Definitely took me a little while to sort of master the tail slam and of course being able to anticipate that, but over the years it has rightly so become a fan favorite monster. However, moving on to the third generation and home to my favorite monster of all time, Lagiacrus, or Lagiacrus. However you decide to say it, I'm definitely Team Lagiacrus, but this creature was the flagship for Monster Hunter 3, Monster Hunter Tri, and truth be told, one of the most unique monsters to date, a Leviathan. Of course, Monster Hunter Tri also introduced underwater combat, so they needed a suitably fitting monster as a flagship. Lagiacrus had mastery of the sea, of course was able to dominate all hunters and foes whilst under the water. Admittedly, it was a bit of a pushover when on land, but it was still a fantastic fight. It has some of my favourite armour sets to date. Of course, there are some fantastic variations from this, including Ivory and Abyssal, but on the flagship front, regular Lagiacrus was the one. Moving on from there to, of course, the in-between one, Portable Third. This one, of course, only hit Japan, did not come to the West, but Zinogre was the flagship for this game. Also a fantastic new creature, a Fanged Wyvern. Of course, the Thunder Wolf, the Spark of Blue, the Lord of Lightning, however you want to describe it. Zinogre being the quadrupedal monster with the superficially lupine features. Its developed limbs, sharp fangs and claws, made it a fearsome foe. Pair that with the fact that it was incredibly quick and of course had command over lightning, it truly was a fantastic fight. It was incredibly satisfying to sort of harness an ice weapon that would definitely exploit its weakness, and especially for hammer users, this was probably my most fun fight because getting some nicely timed hammer swings on a Zinogre for those beautiful KOs was honestly so satisfying. Then moving on from there, we had Monster Hunter 3G or 3 Ultimate, and this time turns our attention to Brachydios. Brachydios, of course, being a brute wyvern, also with a rather unique element. Brachydios, of course, was identified by its glowing green slime-covered horn and fists, and of course this introduction of slime as an abnormal status and of course as a blight was fantastic. I'm sure some of you guys remember some of the overpowered slime weapons back in the day, but this, of course, this introduction of a new mechanic and a new way to play was fantastic. Then we turn our attention to the 4th generation. Of course, the first one being Monster Hunter 4, the one that released originally in Japan, and this was Gormagala, another fantastic monster, a monster that is described as an unknown type. But of course, we now later on know that it evolves into Shagaru, the Elder Dragon itself, but in its basic form, in its first form, it is a very unique wyvern, sharing traits and similarities with that of Elder Dragons, possessing 6 limbs, including of course clawed wings on its back, and it brought with it the Frenzy Virus, a rather unique mechanic that of course factored into various aspects of the series. However, following on from there, for the one that came over to the West, we had 4G and 4 Ultimate, and the flagship for this one was Seregios, a flying wyvern that at first may not necessarily look that exciting. However, when you fight it, it definitely is unique. The sort of pine cone-like structure to it, its ability to throw out bladed scales, and of course the introduction of the bleeding ailment made this a fantastic and also fearsome creature to battle. When of course people were first exposed to the bleed element, learning to sort of crouch down or of course consume the appropriate items to combat that, definitely added a pressure and a dynamic to combat. However, turn your attention then to Generations. Now Generations is an interesting one because technically speaking, it did have 4 flagship monsters. Glavenus, Mizutsune, Gammoth, and Astalos. They were seen as the Fated 4. However, Glavenus was the poster boy for Generations, the one that was on the box, and let's be honest, the best monster. It's a brute wyvern that of course also is effectively a dinosaur. With a huge bladed tail, this thing was incredible to fight. It was a magnificent battle with of course plenty of spectacle to it, fantastic armor sets, and a suitable challenge. However, we then turn our attention to Generations Ultimate. This one also technically had double flagships. You had Valstrax, the poster boy, but you did also have Bloodbath Diablos. Both fantastic battles, but again, focusing on the one that was on the box. Valstrax, of course, the Rocket Wyvern, the Elder Dragon that bursts its way throughout the sky, that literally looks like a fighter jet. This thing is straight out of Gurren Lagann, with of course many of the armor sets looking inspired by that, and even the quest name having nods to phrases from the series. Valstrax truly was a unique creature, and one that to this day, from an audio point of view, stands out as pretty unique. Then we turn our attention to the 5th generation, the current generation. The first one, of course, going to Monster Hunter World being Nogigante. Nogigante was also a fantastic creature, an Elder Dragon, first introduced, of course, in this series. It's a dragon with a bristly appearance, covered in spikes that, of course, constantly regrow as they are broken off, and it has 2 massive horns similar to a bull. This was a hyper-aggressive monster, and honestly, one of my favourite flagship monsters to date. When you factor in the way you fight this thing, with, of course, breaking off the spikes, making it flinch, only to see them regrow later on, and of course, if you don't stay on top of them, they become incredibly dangerous. This truly was a challenging battle. I still remember my first few times fighting this thing to the point where it really was quite a challenge, and of course once you get used to it, it's really not too bad, but overall Nogigante is still such an iconic fight. However, we then turn our attention to Iceborne, the expansion, and then we had Velkhana, another suitably thematic monster, another Elder Dragon, and one that had incredible control over the ice. Velkhana, of course, is a more traditional dragon with the slim, upright body structure of Elder Dragons like Kushala. Its scales are, of course, unique because they are crystalline blue, and its head had a sort of tiara-like crown and small horns. The ability to fire out not only icy projectiles, stab people with the tail, and of course control the arena with massive icicles honestly did make this a pretty big spectacle. And then finally, turn our attention to the last two monsters. Of course, Monster Hunter Rise, we had Magnamalo. Magnamalo was a fantastic creature, a fanged wyvern, this sort of hulking beast that bears a resemblance to a tiger, and it's primarily clad, of course, in purple and yellow plates of armor with a red underbelly. One of the most noteworthy things about this, aside from, of course, its menacing face and the blades on the arms, was the far-reaching tail. This thing will get you even when you think you're safe, and when you are what you perceive to be a safe distance, this thing then jumps into the sky and flies towards you. It's almost like a kind of combination between beast, wolf, tiger, and elements of Valstrax, and honestly, I loved it. And then, of course, most recently in Sunbreak, we have Malzeno, the vampire dragon, if you will. Another Elder Dragon, this time with vampiric features, reminiscent, of course, of a more European dragon, again, similar to Velkhana, with dark scales covering its body, along, of course, with small swarms of flying leech-like creatures called Curio. The Curio themselves introduced a rather unique mechanic as well into the series, which also factored into its armor sets. Malzeno is definitely a fun fight, and of course, when you look at the sort of way that it teleports, definitely made it incredibly ominous, but this was the most recent flagship. Now, of course, outside of that, there have been spin-off titles. There, of course, is also Frontier, but if I went through absolutely every single one, we would be here forever. So, when it comes to mainline games, those are your flagship monsters. Which ones are your favorites? Let me know down below. Which ones have you enjoyed fighting the most? Similarly, let me know. If you guys have missed some other recent videos, you can check out one of these ones, and otherwise, keep it locked for plenty more.